Now that a newly formed local group has stepped forward with the intent of opening the Wenatchee Valley's first ever charter school, there are a variety of questions from every sector of the community about the subject of the charter system in Washington state and how such a school might impact educational services in the region. iFiber One News reached out to the group's co-founders, Sarah Rolfs and Rick Ray, for our own Q&A sit-down to address some of the many avenues of interest and concern about the endeavor, and will be presenting these over the next several weeks in a series we are calling Charter Schools 101. In this, our first installment, we tackle the basics of what a charter school is and how the system of laws which surround them in Washington is different than elsewhere in the nation.
Charter school to me is just another public school opportunity for students and families. Just another option, a way for a region or a town or a local school district to expand opportunities, ways to explore new instructional practices, models, innovation, maybe offer up an opportunity that hasn't existed previously in the public school system.
So charter schools were originally begat with the idea of being able to test drive other instructional models, kind of like taking the new, latest and greatest research and trying to implement something that then, as you tweak it on the smaller scale, that you could scale up into the rest of the traditional public school system. So it's very similar in Washington state in particular of trying to figure out instructional design models that work for underserved populations.
Charter schools were legalized by voters in 36 of Washington's 39 counties in 2012, but were subsequently found to be unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court since they utilized money from the general fund. In 2015, legislators found a workaround of the issue when they shifted the funding base for Washington's charter school system to the state's lottery revenues instead. And just last month, the Supreme Court overturned their earlier finding with the announcement of a 5-4 vote that charter schools are now, in fact, legal. Aside from the political wrangles and questioned constitutionality through its first 6 years of existence, Washington's charter schools establishment is also separated by those of many other states on a variety of fronts as well.
I think one of the ways that Washington charter school sector sets itself apart is it's one of the most highly regulated charter school organizations in the country. They've learned from other people's mistakes. One tenet is you've got to be a nonprofit organization to operate a nonprofit, whether as an individual charter school or as a network of charter schools, which is different than some states that are allowed to be governed by for-profit charter school management companies. That's absolutely not acceptable here in Washington.
Another distinguisher with Washington state charter law is it specifically calls out how you're going to try and serve underserved populations, and it defines that there's it's low income, ethnic minority, high cap, special education, I think are the main ones. And so they actually in the law it states that you've got to try and serve those populations, which is not the same on the national level.
And that really has driven the sector. It's still a very young sector, but that's what's driving the sector. How can we serve populations that have systemically been underserved across the state, and how can we close that opportunity gap, which this state has struggled to do historically? And how can we reach those kids that have not been served oftentimes by their traditional neighborhood public school?
In our next installment of Charter Schools 101, we'll analyze their localized structuring and oversight, as well as the qualifying criteria for their student populations. Reporting for iFiber One News, I'm Chris Hansen.